Well, good evening, Milestone. Hope you're having a great night. We are in September. A lot of schools have started back up this week or maybe last week a little bit. Some are doing remote. Some are going to school at the facilities there or doing a mix of everything. So that means that our schedules have gotten all kinds of crazy and things have changed quite a bit the last week. So hope you're doing all right with all the changes. And I think what a lot of people are going through right now is a lot of stress. And just trying to figure out how to manage all the schedules and manage all the different things that are going on and figure out what schedule's really going on. And in life, we get into a lot of different stressful situations. I think every day has something stressful in it. It could be just that you're driving along and there's something happens while you're driving. It could be a conversation that you have. It could be some post on Facebook or Snapchat, Instagram, whatever it is. It could be something that happens in the news, something financially, something at work. It could be anything. And so we all deal with a different level of stress on a daily basis. What do you do with stress? Stress is so challenging. Sometimes stress is at a level that's way above where we think we can handle it, and sometimes it's at a level where we try to just stay just a little bit above it. How do you handle stress? Did God intend for us to have stress in our lives? And I think the reality of our lives and the reality of our perspective of God is that stress is part of life. Jesus had stress in his life as well. And he worked through that stress, and you can see that at the very end of his life, where he's in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he prays to the Father, and he says, if there's any other way, let this cup pass from me. And while he's praying that, his stress level was so high that he was sweating drops of blood. And we look at that and say, that only happens when you're under extreme duress or extreme stress. So Jesus experienced stress just like we experience stress. That's part of life. And so what do you do with stress is the question. In the story that we've been going through, the book of Esther, we're about to get into one of the most stressful times for Esther. She's the queen, and things are going well, and then all of a sudden Haman, the right-hand man of the king, has this just animosity toward Jewish people because of Mordecai and because of the past. And Mordecai probably just needled him just a little bit by not bowing down to him, and just got him all kinds of frustrated, upset, and he decides that he wants a decree that all of the Jewish people are dead. And that's his desire. He wants them all dead. And so in the process of time, as he's working through those things, now Esther on the other side is saying, I don't know what to do with this. I'm going to be dead too. I need to not tell anybody that I'm a Jew. And Mordecai says to her, and you find this here in chapter 5 and 6, the whole story or chapter 4, 5, and 6. You see the whole story unfolding as Mordecai comes to her and says, maybe this is why you're here. Maybe it's for such a time as this that God put you in the position of being the queen. So Mordecai just pours all kinds of stress on one person, on Esther. Could you imagine the fate of your people? Your nation, nationality, your nation, the fate of that is all in your hands. I mean, sort of, because God's really in control. So it's not totally in her hands, and she would know that. But the amount of responsibility that she's holding right there. Have you ever felt that kind of responsibility with your family or your friends or your coworkers or your employees, where you just feel an extreme amount of pressure and stress on you? Like, if I don't make the right decision, they're going to suffer. It's going to affect them. It's going to hurt them. Things aren't going to go well. Well, Esther is under that, and I would say even more pressure, because the life of her people is at stake, and her life as well is at stake. And Mordecai says it's for such a time as this, and convinces her. And she turns around then and says to Mordecai, then tell the people to pray. Fast and pray for 3 days. She takes it serious. How does she handle stress? She turns and she says, get people praying for me. Sometimes I think the biggest problem we have with stress is that all we want to do is we want to vocalize that we are stressed rather than depend on God in the stress. We vocalize it, we put a post out on Facebook, or we tell others, oh, it's a rough day, I've got things going, it's not good, and we're stressed out. We tell people we're stressed out, but instead what we should do instead is we should be reaching out to our friends and that are fellow believers and saying, listen, things aren't right, but I know God has chosen me for such a time as this. So would you pray for me? That's how you handle stress. And so she does that, and the people pray, and at the end of chapter 4, if I perish is what she says. And going into chapter 5 then, she goes up and she goes to the king to ask for a meal together, and so they have this party together, and that was something, even getting into the presence of the king would be stressful. And so she summons the king, and the king says, that's okay. So they have this meal, and the king says, okay, so what is it that you want? You can have anything up to half the kingdom. And she says, I want another meal. He says, absolutely. Haman is there. He's the invited guest as well. So he's sitting there thinking everything's good, everything's grand. This is awesome. I'm sitting at the table with the king and the queen. It does not get better than this. Haman is not stressed at all, and Esther is under extreme stress, but she plays it so cool that she has this meal, and it's not a big deal, and she's really not giving way to her heart and her mind, what's going on, and she's just playing it cool. They have meal number 2. And in chapter 8 then, here we find the story playing itself out then. On that day, King Ahasuerus gave Queen Esther the house of Haman, the enemy of the Jews, and Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had told how he was related to her. So the king took off his signet ring, which he had taken off from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai. And Esther appointed Mordecai over the house of Haman. And here's how this is all working out. And I think I skipped over chapter 7 a little bit. But how it all worked out, just for sake of time, is she has this banquet with the king and with Haman, and in that banquet, instead of things going negative and Esther being on the hot seat, she turns around, she bows down to the king, and she says, "O king, long live the king. There's this problem, there's someone after my people." And the king says, "Well, who is it?" And she looks over and points at Haman there. Well, after that, the adversary and the enemy, and that's in verse 6 of chapter 7. I skipped over that. The adversary and the enemy of wicked Haman. Well, Haman was terrified. You don't mess with the king's wife. You don't mess with the queen, and he didn't realize he was. And now he's pleading for his life, falls down at Esther's feet. And things just go from bad to worse for Haman. And Haman, he loses his life as a result. Mordecai is elevated then, and he's given a position of dominance, and then you find that there's kind of retaliation then where the Jews are able to go and kill their enemies, and that's the end of the chapter here. Now, what's the point? A ton of stress in this. It could have gone either way. If you look at history, you would look and you'd say there are battles that there were won, and there are battles that you lose. And Esther could have seen it either way. Could have said, well, according to history, there's times where it looks like the people of Israel are annihilated, and things could go really bad. So maybe today's the last day that I live. Or maybe God gives grace and mercy, and things go right. We like to quote this one verse. Romans 8:28, for all things work together for good to those that love God. And we quote that in that kind of short little portion, and we say everything's going to work together for good, and we say, well, what's good? Our definition of good is based on the opinions of what's going on in our heart and mind as to what our future would look like. The best future we have is how we look and say, this is what's good. But there are many times where you'd say, it didn't look so good. And the way that it turned out, it is not my way of doing this good thing. But God has a different plan. And honestly, it could go either way. And here's the reality of Esther's life, and the reality of Mordecai, and the reality of our life. When we are stressed, the great fixer of stress is hope. It's that the only way to really resolve stress is to have hope. It's to know that, yes, this could go bad, this could be horrible, this could cause pain, this could be a really awful situation, but the reality is the only way through that is hope. I heard this a couple weeks ago, and I jotted it down. Hope is the greatest elixir. Hope is the greatest elixir. And sometimes people feel absolutely hopeless. And in a season that we've been going through for the past 6 months or so, the amount of hopelessness that's out there is way more than what it was a year ago. We are given this insight into God's plan, in that Jesus Christ has done everything to pave the way for us to have a relationship with him for now and for all eternity. Our greatest hope is not in anything in this life. Our greatest hope is beyond this life. And so it's within that context. And Mordecai says it as well, and Esther says it, and they reflect on this, that, hey, the nation's not going to be over. It's just that because God says this is an eternal nation. So the reality is God's got this. And so our hope is in God. He's got this. No matter what, he's got the future. He knows what's going on. But in the stressful situation that we're living through, we turn back and we say, okay, God, what do you have for this moment and this day? Because my hope can only be and should only be in you. How often is it that you live through a stressful situation and you're all stressed out and, oh man, it's going to be horrible, and it turns out just fine? I would suggest that probably that happens most of the time. And so I really want to just kind of push us back in the middle of this week to be able to hold on and say, okay, regardless of what stress you might be going through, my question isn't about the stress so much, it's about the hope. Is your hope that your bank account will be at a certain level? Is your hope that your car will run at a certain point? Is your hope that your job will, or is it that this relationship will, or whatever circumstance that you want to work out in the way that you want, is that the hope you're looking for? Because that is not going to last much longer than finishing that circumstance. Your hope should be greater. Our hope should be in the Lord Jesus Christ, that he is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He is in control of all things, and he knows what is best. And so we sit back and say, I can be stressed because that's normal. But God, as I'm walking through the stress, help me to walk through it with you instead of with anyone else. And help me to see that focal point that you have, that no matter what happens, you've got this in control. And help me not to jump off of where you are. And so church, I want to encourage us there. This story of Esther is a tremendous story, really, of hope. That when things aren't going so well, that God gives us tremendous hope, knowing that he's in control and he's going to work things out in ways that we didn't even expect. For God to even have the insight, I mean, it's a ridiculous statement, but for God to have the insight to put Esther as the queen prior to all of this says a whole lot about God. That God's got it in control prior to the stress, and he's already lined up the pieces to handle it. So maybe the thing that you're stressed out about today, maybe God already has a solution lined up, and he's just waiting to put the pieces together, to finish it, to work it together for good. And so, church, be encouraged. I hope that the middle of this week you'll take some time, read through. I covered 4 chapters here in the book of Esther and could have read through it, but you can read through that yourself, starting really it's in chapter 4 all the way through the end. And just want to encourage you to stay in God's word and to be encouraged by it and stay focused throughout every day, and especially in this midweek time. Thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. Have a great rest of the week, and we'll catch up with you on Sunday. And on Sunday, we want to celebrate communion together. And so prepare your hearts for that, and we want to just look forward to that, just getting together and celebrating communion. And we'll let you know a little bit further in the weekend as to any details or any changes. If weather has any issues, we'll figure out what we're going to do there and let you know. So thanks so much. Have a great rest of the week. Take care.
Lord, we praise you with the days we have.